A very good morning to all of you, respected guests, respected faculty coordinators. A warm greetings from Android Club. I, Abhinav Dey, the president of the Android Club, the series related to Android-related application, which is Andro Series. Now, this series is conducted by Android Club of VIT University Bhopal. VIT University Bhopal was founded in 2017 by Chancellor Sir, Dr. G. Vishwanathan Sir, and we have completed 5 years from now, and Android Club being the oldest club out of all. With us, we have our guest speaker Mohammad Sohail Sir, Tamanna ma'am, and our faculty coordinator Varshali ma'am and Ganeshan Sir. With their blessings, we would like to start the event. Now, I would like to hand the event flow to Dishita for the continuation.
Good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to Android Series 1.0. This event is based on giving you all a deeper understanding on Android development starting from beginner level. Over the course of series, we will help guide you through the basics of Android development. So in this series of event, we will bring some amazing guest speakers who will be sharing their knowledge and expertise with us. For today's session, we have planned to bring you a range of topics that will commence from the basics of Android Studio to intents and fragments in Java. So get ready to learn from some of the best in the field. We hope you enjoy this event and gain valuable insights into the world of Android development. Once again, welcome to the Android Club's first event in the series, Android Series 1.0. Now, I will be describing in detail the timeline for today's event. So we have two sessions today. Session 1 will include basics of Android Studio, applications, activities, and views, fundamentals of user interface design, use of application logs and toast, design of menus, design of context menu. The timings will be from 10 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and then we will have a short break of 11:30 a.m. to 11:45 a.m. After this, we will have a long break of 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. when the session 1 is over. And moving on to session 2, it is about intent and fragments, and its timings are 3 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. You all are free to ask the doubts in the Google Forms and in the MS Teams as well during the session. Now, please join me in welcoming Mohammad Sohail, a talented software developer and Android developer mentor with over 2 years of experience in the field. Mohammad Sir is currently working as a software development at BIK, where he applies his expertise to developing innovative and effective software solutions. In addition to his work at BIK, Mohammad Sir is also an Android development mentor at My Before, joining BIK and My Captain. Mohammad Sir worked as an Android engineer at Rivi and as an Android developer at FindMind Analytics. He has also been involved in several technical committees, including the Mozilla Firefox Club at VIT and CodeChef VIT chapter. He holds a Bachelor of Technology degree in Computer Science from Vellore Institute of Technology and is currently pursuing an MBA in Information Technology and System Management from NMIMS Global. We are thrilled to have you, sir, as our speaker at our event, and thank you for joining us today. So please welcome Mohammad Sohail.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for inviting me for this particular session. I hope everyone is ready with the session with their Android Studio setup. So after the warm intro, we can directly jump into the coding itself. So let me share my screen and we can directly jump into the session and start with the first session. So we will start from the very basics. We will start from the very basics, like all the basic fundamentals as described earlier, all the different topics that will be covered in the session 1. So for the people who have just installed Android Studio, this might not be the window that pops up when you open up your Android Studio. This, if you have already worked with it, it will automatically pop up the older project. So in case you're working it on the first time, it will show a different window for you. It will open up something like this. And if you have been working on this, you might know how to open up this particular window. So this is where it all starts. This is where you get all the different templates for your projects. So these are the different templates, as you can see. ranging from the very basics to the a bit complex also. So as we are going to start with the uh, very basic thing right now. So what we will do is we will start with something called MD activity. Okay. As this is something which is the bare bones of an Android application where no other components are added beforehand. So it will give you a better idea on how to add a lot of different components to it. So we will choose this as the starting template and click on next. And after this, you will get another window which tells you to enter all the details of your project. So here you can enter any name which you want. It's totally up to you. So for the sake of the session, let's call it, let's say VITB session one. Okay, you can call it anything you want. And after that, there are a few other fields which you can see. The first is package name, then is the location where you want to save it, the language, the minimum SDK. So the package name is something which can be anything actually, but if you're planning to deploy your project, if you're planning to release your Android app to the Play Store, we have to make sure that this is unique. So the idea behind the package name is that it is generally reversed. So let's say you have a domain, let's say you have a website, for example, let's say google.com. So to make an application for that particular company, let's say Google is deciding to create a new application and wants to deploy it on the Play Store. So in order to give it a unique package name, what they generally do is they reverse the name of the domain. So google.com becomes com.google followed by the application name. So similarly, you can have anything here you want as far as you are doing it for, let's say, learning and testing. But let's say when you want to actually deploy it, you have to change it to a unique name. So since a domain which you have, which you own is unique to you, then it is better that you use that domain name followed by the package name. Okay. So after that, you can save it anywhere you want. It's totally up to you, any location you want. And finally, the language, please make sure that you're choosing Java. Okay. So currently the preferable language by Android team, by Google is Kotlin, but we can still use Java to develop our applications. So choose the language as Java. And after that, there is the last field, which is the minimum SDK, that is the software development kit. Or in very layman terms, it is basically the version, it is the minimum version that would support the application. So why we need to set this? So the basic idea here is that if you have been following the releases of Android, so what they do is in every Android release, they add some new functionality to it. Like there was no picture in picture mode long back, then they added those. There was no dual applications that you can work with at the same time, then they added that. So a lot of things kept on adding after like every new version of the Android. So in order to use those functionalities, we need to make sure that we are setting a minimum Android version. So what would happen, let's say if I choose Android 7, so all the functionalities that was released in Android 7 and above, I can use those. And the applications or the devices which are running Android 7 and above can use my application, which we will going to create. And for the devices which are having a lesser API version or lesser Android version, won't be able to use your application. So the thought might arise that why can't we use the very like older version? So the problem is if you are using a very older version, then a lot of functionalities which you want to use, which is modern in terms of Android development, you won't be able to use it. So we have to make a trade-off here that you have to come to a particular version which is suited for most of the people. So as you can see here, it says that 94.4% of the devices that is running Android is having Android 7 and above. So this is a very huge target right now. So we can work with this. That is why by default it is chosen as Android 7. So this is pretty much it for the configuration of your application when you are creating a new one. Okay. So I hope everything is clear up till here. So once you have added all these fields, just simply click on finish. and it will open up the project for you. So if you're opening it for the very first time, if you're, as I said, if you're creating your Android project with the very first time, it will take few minutes to build all these files. So what is happening here is that it is downloading a lot of packages that is already pre-built in the template. So it is, as you can see, a lot of things are getting downloaded at the bottom bar. So a lot of things are getting installed. So once that is done, we can finally move on and start with actually writing the project. So for me, see, it's already done, but it might be the case that it takes a longer time for you if you're doing it for the very first time. So yeah, so once that this is done, once everything is downloaded, all the packages are installed, we can actually start with the project. So for this session, what I have decided is that the very basic screen is a form. So any application which you open up, like any Android app or any sort of app which you open up, the first thing that you see on the screen is some sort of a form. There might be just single button, there might be a couple of fields, but it is a certain kind of form. For example, let's say you're opening Instagram for the first time or Twitter for the very first time. It will ask you to enter your email and password or directly give you a button to log in with Gmail. But all these things is a form, right? So we can start with that. So for this session, we will create a screen which will be using all of the different basic fundamental components, and we will create a form. Okay. But before diving straight into it, we need to understand few things, a few technical things. As mentioned earlier, like there were few couple of things like application, activities, and views. What are all these things? So let's start with what is written on the screen first. So it will give you a better practical understanding over it. So in Android, the basic concept here is that there are two fundamental components, if we can say so. So there is something called activity and there is something called fragments. I think fragments will be covered in the later sessions, but for the activity, it is the very basic container, as you can think of it, where you are displaying your screen. Okay. So it's like a very big container where you are displaying your screen. And application is the application itself. So why this is needed here is that we need to understand the context of all these two things. So there is something called application context and there is something called activity context. So an application can have multiple activities. Okay. So for the time being, you can consider activity as screens. So an application can have, let's say, multiple screens, right? So all these screens can have their own context to it. For example, you want certain thing to happen in only one screen which shouldn't be happening in the other screen. So in that case, you need to make sure that whatever you are doing should be inside the context of that particular activity, right? Similarly, when it comes to application, let's say there are some cases where you want certain thing to run throughout your application. For example, uh, let's take an example of Instagram, right? So what is happening in the real time is that whenever you are scrolling, there is some sort of DB call, database call that is happening, which is giving you back the latest feeds, right? Now, this can be either done in the same app, same activity itself, in the same home feed itself, or this can be done throughout the application itself, right? So that is where we need to take care of all these things. So otherwise, what would happen here is that there is something called data leaks and memory leaks. So what does that mean is, let's say you want to use something in one activity, but it is getting leaked to another activity. So that shouldn't be the case. Otherwise, it would cause a lot of performance issues. Okay. So those are the very basic fundamentals about activities and applications. But moving forward, let's see what is given to us beforehand and try to understand what is there and how we can use it to our needs. So the very first thing you can see here is something called public class main activity extends app compact activity. So I'm guessing everybody understands the basic OOPS concepts. So when you are dealing with software development, majority of the time you will be working with some sort of an OOPS concept, right? It might be inheritance, it might be something else like abstraction or something, but it will be there. So as you can see, the very first line, it says extends app compact activity. So what is happening here is that we are extending a different class. So basically we are using inheritance in the activity itself. So if we go line by line, what is happening here is that there is a class called main activity, which we have already declared when we were creating the, or when we were writing the configuration for the project creation. So we have given the name of the activity as main activity. So by default, what happens here is that Android Studio is using the Android SDK, right? So Android SDK basically a collection of different classes and functions. So what does that do is it provides you with a lot of classes. So one of those classes is something called app compact activity. So this is an helper class which provides you a lot of different functions to override, and you can use these functions to perform the task that you want. So to make it easier, they have already provided us with a lot of, yeah. So what we are doing here is we are extending app compact activity and we are overriding a function named as onCreate. So this is, as you can see, it says provide protected void onCreate, and there is a parameter in this particular function, bundle save instance, and then there are two more lines. So the first question that might arise is that why we are overriding onCreate? Why not something else? So the basic funda over for this is that in an Android, there is a life cycle that needs to be followed. Okay. So everything in any sort of software development process, there is a certain lifestyle for your application. So it starts and then it ends, right? So in between, there are a lot of different things that are happening. So let's say when your application starts, what this will do is this function will trigger a certain function. Okay. And then another function and then another function. So all these different functions are the different states of your life cycle. So the very first state of your life cycle is on create. So let's say when you click on a certain application, the very first function that will be triggered by the activity is on create. So that is why it is already provided to us, because uh, since this is the first thing that will be triggered, we need to write all our logic inside this so that before the screens pops up, everything is ready and we can use that variables and functionalities on our screen. That is why this is already given to us, and that is why we have to mention all our UI related things inside this particular function so that it is ready to use when the screen turns on. So on create is called even before the screen turns on. Okay. As soon as you click it, it will be called. There are different sort of states. There is on create, on restart, on start, on pause. A lot of different states are there. Another good example of this is, let's say if you are using let's say Hotstar, Netflix, or YouTube Premium or something. Let's say you are viewing a video and you press the home button. So what happens over there is that it doesn't closes the application, but it shrinks the window and opens the picture-in-picture mode, right? You are still able to view the video, but you can also scroll other applications. So what is happening over there is that as soon as you click on the home button, a certain function gets triggered since the life cycle of your application changed. You prefer, like, you willingly uh, switch to the home screen, right? So as soon as you do that, it triggers a certain function, and inside that particular function, that logic of the picture in picture is written. So whenever you are trying to create certain logics where it depends upon the state of your application, like let's say when your application is going to the background, you want to do something. When it's coming back to foreground, you want to do something. Then in those cases, you need to use these different state functions to trigger your logic. Uh, just a second, let me turn on my webcam. I think it's better. Okay. So after this, the next line, the next important line here is this, which says set content view, and we are providing a layout to it. So what is happening here is that for this particular activity, we have to give a screen, right? So the basic concept in Android development is that there are two different things to be considered. There is an XML file, there is a Java file. Java will take care of all the business level logic, and XML will take care of all the UI related logic. and we then have to interlink these two things in the Java file itself. So for example, when you're trying to create or design a button, it will be done in the XML file, and when you want to perform a logic on the click of the button, that will be done in the Java file. Okay. So by default, as you can see, two files have popped up. The first is main activity. The second is activity underscore main.xml. Uh, if you are getting this screen on opening the activity main.xml, just click on the split option on the top right hand side. It will open up both these screens. The left hand will be the coding part, the right will be the preview. So this is XML where we will be designing the UI related things, and then we are going to link this to the main activity.java. So by default, you can see since it already created an activity underscore main XML, it linked the layout to it. So set content view basically tells here set basically what it does here is that it sets the layout for this particular activity. So this activity is main activity, and we are setting activity underscore main layout for this particular activity. Okay. Now that's pretty much it for the basic like boilerplate that is generated as soon as you open up your project. Now, if we go to the activity main.xml, here is where all the different UI things are done. Okay. So let me clear this also to give you a better understanding. Now, we talked about application, we talked about activity, we talked about the inheritance part, we talked about what, like layout and all those things, why we need Java, why we need XML. Let's talk about the UI related components that is already provided to us. So the very basic UI related component is view. Okay. So as I told earlier that Android SDK already provides us with a lot of stuff and we just need to use those stuff, right? So Android SDK already provides us with a very basic class called view, and there are a lot of different classes which extends that particular class. So view is having some core functionalities into it, and there is, let's say you want to show a text, so there is a class called text view. Then let's say you want to show a button, it's simply called button. Then there is, let's say you want to take an input, it is called edit view. So all these different classes are extending the basic view class. So view is the core class for the UI component when it comes to Android development. Okay. So in the XML, what we are doing here is we are using those classes as a component, and we are manipulating with the properties to to design our application. Okay, as simple as that. We are just using those classes, and we are using the predefined properties to it. For example, let's say if we are going to declare, let's say, a text, and we want to change the size of the font, so we can just simply declare a text view, and we can just simply change the, let's say, text size. So text size will be the property, the text view will be the component, right? So by default, you can see there is already a component added to it, which says constraint layout. So it's actually a very huge name, but it's simply called constraint layout. Sake of simplicity, it's better we don't use constraint layout for now. Let's use a very simple layout, and I will talk about what is layout and why we are changing it to a different one. Okay. So the very first thing that we need to do is we need to just remove the constraint layout part and just choose linear layout, and also change the end tag also to linear layout. So what is layout? So layout is basically you can think of it as a canvas. So like a painter has a canvas and you paint on the canvas, right? Canvas can be of different shapes, of different texture. Similarly, when it comes to Android development, when you are creating a screen, there is a layout which acts as the canvas of that particular screen, and you have to put all your elements inside that particular layout. So this the layout, as you can see, it takes up the entire screen actually in most of the cases. Okay. And so there are different kinds of layout with different properties. Earlier, as you saw, it showed constraint layout. So that is also a relatively, I would say, a modern layout. But earlier there were like relative layout, linear layout, coordinate layout. There are lots of different layouts, and each of these layouts are having their own functionalities and usage. Okay. So linear layout, we will start with linear layout, or we will create the entire screen with the linear layout because it is the basic approach when it comes to starting with Android. So As the name suggests, a linear layout, linear as in a certain way, in a straight way. So what happens inside this layout is whatever you put inside the linear layout will be either like from top to bottom or from left to right. You can change the orientation of the elements that you're adding inside it, but it will always be either top to bottom or from left to right. Okay. So moving forward, like there are already few properties that are already added to it. So we will see like what are these properties, why we have. Yeah. Okay. So moving on, as I said, there are a lot of different properties that I think. Let me share my screen first here. So yeah. So as I said, we were talking about the different properties that were already given to us. So for this particular layout, as you can see, there are a lot of different properties that are already mentioned. So the very first is something called XMLNS, which is basically XML namespace. So what is happening here is that we are getting all these properties or these fields from this particular URI. Okay, it's not an URL, it's a URI. So if you try to open this link, it won't open up anything. It's basically a space in the internet where like few information is stored. So what we are doing here is that we are referencing this entire path with this particular keyword. Okay, and then there are like other paths also for different properties actually. So the core is this, the first one, which says Android, and this is the path from where we get all those functionalities, like all those different properties. And then there is app, then there is tools. Okay, so Android is referencing to this particular path, and using Android we can refer to different properties. So this is how XML works actually. Like if you want to dive into it, you can feel free to look for it on the internet. There are a lot of different documentations and a lot of different videos regarding XML. So basically, just to simplify this is acting as a variable. Okay, this is acting as a variable which is referencing this, and then we are using this variable to update this particular property. Okay, so the very first thing, as you can see, it says layout width, and second is layout height. So it's very simple, as the name suggests, that we are declaring the width, the width of the layout and the height of the layout over here. Now, when it comes to the value of it, you can see it's a string. It says match underscore parent. It's not a number. It's not 100, 50, 60. It's just a string which says match underscore parent. So what does this do is that there are some keywords, there are some namespaces that is already predefined in Android. So one of those is match parent, the other is wrap content. Okay. So for the time being, let's understand what is match parent. So when you choose match parent, what it does is it matches the height and like it matches the dimension with its parent. So layout width is matching the dimension of its parent. So whatever the width of its parent is, it will match the same dimension. So in this case, there is no parent to it, right? There is nothing above linear layout. So the screen itself acts as the parent. So whatever the screen size of your device is, the width of that particular screen size will be taken by the linear layout, since we have mentioned the value as match parent. And similarly, it goes with height. Okay. Okay. So let's say moving forward, we will add a few components. As I said, we will be creating the basic form. Okay. So the first thing, let's add, here is a text. Okay. So for adding a text, we will simply add something called text view. Again. Just a second. Okay. So as I said, the first thing that we are going to add here is a text view. So we'll simply write text, and you can see it automatically pops up with the select text view. And you can see these two properties automatically got populated. Why so? Because these are the two important properties, right? If you're not mentioning any layout width or height, then it won't be displayed on the screen. Basically, you are telling that there is no dimension to the element itself. That is why it is necessary that you add layout width and height most of the times. There are cases where even if you don't add one of those, it will work. But for the sake of simplicity, just remember that you have to somehow mention the dimension of the element you are creating. Okay. For this case, let's add the width as wrap content and height as also as wrap content. Okay. So now what this wrap content means? Okay, it is opposite to match parent. So match parent basically was matching the dimension of the parent. So text view will basically display a text. Okay. So whatever the size of the font is, it will take the dimension of that particular font. So the let's say the font size by default is 12. So it will take the height of 12, and whatever the length of the text is, it will take that much width. Okay, so to give you an example, let's add a text to it. Let's say BITB session 1. So as you can see on the right hand side, this is the blue box is the component, the text view, and it is taking as much width as the text that I have entered over here. So text is the property for uh, adding that value to the text view. So we are giving the value of VITB session 1 to the text view, and you can see it is taking as much width as the font itself, and as much height, like as much height as the font itself, and as much width as the content, the length of the content. So there are some components that are having some predefined size to it. For example, text view is having some predefined font style to it. Button is having some predefined height and width to it. So in those cases, whenever you write wrap content, it will take those default dimensions. Okay. But there are a lot of different components which is not having a predefined, let's say, size to it. In those cases, you need to mention the exact value for it. Okay. Now let's make it a better. So right now we have just added it as text view VITB session 1. What we can do here is we can change the color. Okay. So just choose add the red color / black and it will change to black. Okay. Now the question will pop up like from where is this black color coming up? So if you go to your project, if you go to res, if you go to values, there is a file which says colors.xml, and these are the project related colors. So from the those or from that particular file, you can get the color you want. So for example, let's say uh, I want to use a different color. No, let's say, or otherwise, what you can do is you can also give a hex value to it. For example, if you're giving this, it will be red, right? So this is a hex code for red and it will be red. Otherwise, you can simply use the colors either from the Android level or from your project level. You can use these colors also, or you can use some predefined colors also. Okay. So once you've added the color, let's also change the size of the font. So we just click on text size and let's choose 30 SP. So now you can see it, the size increases, right? Now the size has increased to 30 SP. Now, what is SP? So SP is the unit for the which is generally or which is used for giving the size of a text. Okay, there are generally two units that are used in Android. One is text, and for all the other places we use DP. Okay. So why so? Because that when we are scaling, let's say you have an Android device, you are targeting, you're not targeting to a certain screen size of an Android device. The device can be like the size can be ranging from 5 inches to let's say 6.5 inches of the screen size. So accordingly, the text should also be changed, like the size or the font size. The let's say 30, the font size for a 5-inch device is different as compared to the 6-inch device, because the pixels are different in each of these devices. So if you want your device to scale according to the pixels, then in that case you need to mention SP. In all the other cases, when you don't want it to scale it like that, when you want it to be static, we use DP. When it comes to margins padding, then we use DP, because text is something which shouldn't be static. Because other reason here is also, let's say you have mentioned a static text size, and let's say the user went to the Android settings and changed the font size to, let's say, small, from default to small. Now in that case your text won't change because you have added a static size to it. But if you are using an SP instead of DP, it will scale accordingly. Okay, let's also center it. Right now it's not centered. Okay, so for centering it, we will be using layout gravity. Let's say center horizontally. So if you do center it, and there are actually different ways to do it. So instead of doing match uh, wrap content, you can use match parent itself. So now what happens is, it's take the entire width of the screen, and you can simply say gravity center horizontally, and it will center. So there are two properties. One is layout gravity and one is gravity. So layout gravity is when you are changing the position of the entire element itself, and gravity is used when we are changing the content inside that particular element. Okay, so right now what we did here is that we modified the layout width to match the parent. So it took the entire width, but still the text was on the left hand side, right? So we wanted to make it center. So change the position of the content inside it. We added gravity and added the value as center horizontal, because we want to horizontally center the content inside it. Okay. So let's also add some padding to it. Let's say 20 dp. So, or let's say not 20 dp, let's say 60. Okay. So after this, what we will do here is, let's say we'll add two input fields. Okay. We will add one input field for, let's say, email, one for password, and let's say one for a drop down menu, where we will be using the context menu, a button, and another menu. Okay, so like 3 4 elements we will be adding into it to understand it more clearly. First of all, let's just add two input and a button. Okay, and then we will connect all these things with the Java file, so you will understand it more better. After this, since you want to take an input, so input is called edit text when it comes to Android. Okay, so we will write, let's say, match parent, and let's say wrap content. So now, yeah, so now you can see you are not able to view the element that we have added. If you look closely, you can see there are like two blue dots on the right hand side. Okay, but you're not able to view it. So the reason behind here is that, if you remember early, that I told that linear layout can either put elements from left to right or from top to bottom. So by default, it puts the element from left to right. So since we have mentioned the first element, also the order matters, right? So whatever you're putting first will come first. So since we put the width as match parent, so it took the entire width of the screen. Okay. And since the default orientation of the linear layout is from left to right, that is horizontal, there is no space available for the next element. That is why it is not visible on this. It is not visible on the screen. Also, you can see it gives you a error also over here. It gives you a red line which says wrong orientation. So what we have to do is we have to change the orientation. We have to write orientation vertical. So as soon as you do orientation vertical, now you can see this edit text component. So as if you click on this particular component, you can see the blue box. This is the edit text component. Okay, now we can use this edit text to enter the values also. But before that, let's also make it a bit cleaner. We will give some margin horizontal to it. Let's say 16 dp. So as soon as you give some certain value, you can see there are some spaces horizontally added to it. And look closely that I've added DP for it, not SP for it. As I told, for SP is used for text sizes only, and for all the other padding margin, we use DP. And for a general rule that regarding padding and margin, it is what is generally used is that we use multiples of 2. So it can be 2, 4, 6, 8, and most commonly it is used multiples of 4. Okay, you can change it, it's not a very hard and fast rule, but generally it is what is preferred in the industry. Okay, so once we've added some margin horizontal to it, we can also add some placeholder value to it. Okay, so the placeholder value is not called placeholder itself, the property is called hint. For this hint, we will be adding enter email. So now what this will do here is that as soon, by default, it will give you a grayed out text saying enter email, which acts as an information for the user that you have to enter the email in this particular box. And as soon as he starts typing, this will be removed, and whatever he is typing will be appearing on the particular box. Okay. After this, there are few like other properties also that we can work with here. So by default, what will happen here is that when you click on this box, a keyboard will appear, like a keyboard will pop up, and it will be an alphanumeric keyboard. It will give you all the text and numbers. But if you have seen, or if you have a focus on what is the keyboard that opens up when you're entering an email, then you would realize that it is different when you are entering a normal text. So when you are entering an email, the keyboard is having some extra buttons to it. There is an @ button, and there are in some devices there is some like .com and .in buttons also. So in order for that particular keyboard to pop up so that the user can easily enter the email, what we can do here is we can just simply add input type, and we can see this property is having all these different values assigned to it. So we will search for email, and you can see it gives you a text email address. Now what will happen here is that when you click on this particular box, it will open up a keyboard which is having the @ and the .com button. Okay. Now similar to this, we can just simply copy this and paste it. And we have to give a margin, or what we can do better here is that instead of giving margin horizontal, we can do just margin. It gives margin in all the directions. Similarly for here, we will give another margin. It will again give margin in all the directions. Okay. You can play around with it. It's totally up to you. We can change it to, let's say, give it as 16 for the sake of demo. So the first in edit text is asking the user for the email. Let's make the second one to ask for the password. Okay. In this case, the speciality about the password inputs is that the text shouldn't be visible. When you are entering the text, it should be either like stars or circles. It shouldn't be visible on the box itself. So similar to what we did earlier, instead of adding input type, we can just simply search for password. Now there are like different password properties, but the general one is this text password. So what will this do is it will open up a QWERTY keypad, and whatever you enter, it will mark it as a circle or star, depending upon the OS and the device you are using. Similarly, if you are having a number-based password, you can just use number password, and it will open up just a numpad. And whenever you type something on it, it will mark it as a star or a circle. Okay. So the last component for now we will add is a button, and let's give the width as match parent and the height as wrap content. Let us give a margin as, let's say, 8 dp, and we can add the text also, let's say, save. Good. So you can play with the colors also. So you can add background tint to it. You can give any shades of color you want. So let's make it green for now. Let's make it green. It's too much green. So I think black is better. Keep it as black. Okay. So we have two input fields. We have a button. We have a text. Okay. But all these things right now are just static. These are not doing anything right now. Okay. These are just a plain static screen. So what we have done so far is we have understood the layout, we have understood what is view, we have added text view, we have added edit text. We understood some of the basic properties like input type, hint, layout width, height, margins, and all these things. Let's first of all run the application and check how it looks on an actual device. So for running the application, I'm hoping you have you can use either of those things. You can use the emulator or you can use your device to connect with your Android Studio. So for now, I'm using the emulator. So we will click on this play button and it will load up or it will boot up the emulator and it will install this particular application to that particular emulator. It might take some time depending upon your system. So after this, what we will do, first of all, we will see if it is looking uh, good or not on the emulator. And then we will connect all these three different elements that we have added to the Java part and we will play around it. We will add some toasts and all and logs around it to understand what are those. Okay. So as you can see, the emulator is popping up. It's opening up the emulator. And at the bottom, it says launching app on Pixel 4 API 30. So API 30 is basically the SDK level 30. So this emulator is having the API level 30 to it. So as you can see, we have this top bar by default. So there are some themes that are already added to your project. So according to that particular theme, the toolbar and the app bar is at the top with the name of your app. Then this is the screen that we have just created. Okay. So if we click on the email, you can see it pops up a keyboard and you can see there is an @ button that is added. If we haven't added the input type text email address, this button wouldn't be there. Okay. So let's say I add some, not there. Let's add some random email. For the password, if I add anything, you can see it uh, prevents it from displaying by converting it to a circle. So this is also done because we have added the input type as text password. Okay. So we can add anything you want. Okay. And then this is the button that we have added. So right now, as you can see, nothing happens. If you click on it, nothing happens at all. It is just a static page right now. Okay. So next what we will do here is that we will connect all these elements with the Java part so that we can perform the actual logic on these three elements for now. Okay, let me hide the emulator and we will move to the main activity.java. So here what we need to do is that we need to uh, somehow refer to all these three elements. Okay. By default, it won't refer to all these three elements because there is nothing to refer with. There is no unique identity to all these three elements as of now. So what we need to do here is we need to add some IDs to all these three different elements. Okay. For text view, we can skip because we are not performing any operation on the text view. It's just a static value. So we don't need to add it to the Java part for this particular project. But for all the other three elements, we need to add the ID so that we can refer it in the Java file. We will write simply ID. And now here you can see it says @ ID slash. So this is a prefix that we need to add. whenever we are adding an ID to the view of a Android. So for the edit text, when we are adding an ID to it, we have to add the prefix as @ plus ID slash followed by whatever the ID you want to give to it. The reason behind is that when we are writing @ plus ID slash, what in the background, what is happening is that it creates an entry for this particular ID and map it to this particular element. There is a certain file which is called the R file, r.java file, which is an internal file where all the different UI related elements are registered. So all the layouts, all the elements that you have added, all the images that you have added, all the videos that you have added, everything will be listed in that particular file. Like it is divided accordingly, like layout, there will be a certain subclass called layout and all the layouts will be declared inside it. There will be a separate subclass called ID and all the IDs will be declared inside the particular subclass. So for in order to add a new entry to it, we need to add the prefix @ plus ID slash. Okay, so after this you can give anything you want, but just make sure that make it readable. Just don't give some WhatsApp like a text name to it. Don't just simply write like IE or something, input email or something. So the better approach here is that just simply uh, give a readable name so that whenever you read the ID name anywhere, you can simply understand that what this ID is referencing to directly. Instead of you searching for this ID throughout your project, it is better that you give it a better name to it. So for this particular text, edit text, since we are inputting an email, I have given the ID as input email. Similarly for edit text, we will give it as input password. And for button, you can write the button and like completely, but we can also write button BT and also over here. So we can write BT and save, which basically means that this is the save button. Okay. So the general rule that is followed here is that the first half is the a type of element. Second half is what the element does. So the first half is the states that this is an input element, and second half states that that email is something that is inputted. Similarly for button save. So we have added all these three different IDs to all these three different elements. Now we can refer to these three elements in the Java file. Okay. So what we will do here is that we will declare three different objects. So if you remember that I told earlier that all these different views are classes that are already given to us by the Android SDK. So all these edit text, text view, button, everything is uh, are the different classes that are given to us by the Android SDK. So what we will do here is at the top level, just inside the class, we will declare three empty objects. Okay. So we can simply write. So what we will do here is, as I said, we will declare three empty objects. So we have two elements or two objects of edit text type and one object of button type. So we will write edit. As soon as you write edit, you can see it automatically suggests you to choose edit text. Choose that, it imports at the top, and make sure, or I would suggest that it's not necessary that you name it exactly like this, but what I prefer here is that you give the object the same name as you have given the ID. So we have given the ID for the input as input email. So it's better if you give the same name for the object over here, because it helps you to easily relate the objects with the IDs that it is referencing to. Okay. So we will write input email and the second one is input password. And the second type of element was button. So we will write button, choose it. It automatically imports at the top and name it as button save. So you can see we have added like two different types of objects. The first one is the edit text. The second is the button. So first we have two objects. Right now, these are empty objects. It won't give anything right now. It is all null values for now. So inside the on create, if you remember, I told that the on create will be triggered first. So what happens here is it will set the layout for this particular activity as the activity main, which is this. And now what we can do here inside this is we can refer the IDs, and we can map the ID with the object. So we will write input email equal to just a second. So we will write input email equal to find. As soon as you write find, it gives you an option which says find view by ID. And this, first of all, let's write the value to it, and I will explain what this means. So we will write r.id dot, and we can see these are the three different IDs that we have created, right? So we want to map the input email with the input email ID that we have mentioned. So what is happening here is that this is an internal function which is mapping the view for the ID that we have provided. So this is the ID that we have given to a particular view, to the edit text view. So what it does is that it looks for this ID. If you remember, I also told that there is an R class and there are some subclasses inside it. So R is the class which is having the subclass ID inside it, which is having the entry of this particular ID. So now this ID is mapped to this particular component. So what we are doing here is we are simply referencing to the ID, and in return, it is giving me back the reference of this particular component. Now, whatever I perform on this particular object will be reflected or will be operated on this particular component. Okay. After that, we will add input password like r.id dot. Similarly, you can see it gives you input password. And for the last, we will add button save. So far, we have added input email, input password, button save. All these three things are mapped and linked with the IDs respectively. Okay. So now the next topic that we will do. So for up till now, what we have done here is we have worked with the basic components, three basic components: the text, the input, and the button. And we have understood how to link it right now. Okay, we are still not performing any actions on it right now. We have just linked the objects in the Java file with the XML file. That's it. And we have also understood the basic UI functionalities using the linear layout. Okay. So moving forward, what we will do next is we will learn something about logs and toasts. So these are the two, I would say, functionalities that is provided to us. So one of them is actually a UI component. Second one is an internal functionality. So log is simply a logging of a text. Logs are used in all the different software development like domains. It is used in backend, frontend, in web, let's say in React, Node.js, everywhere it is used in some form or the another. In the web, we use console.log. Over here, we use something called log. This log is a class. So what we will first do is we will click the button and we will log the email that we have entered. Okay, so we will click the button and we will see how we will work with the clicking of the button. First of all, like there is a certain concept behind it called listeners. We have to understand that first, and then we will see how we can click a button and how we can log whatever we want on the click of the button. Okay, so just a second. Yeah. Okay, so what we will understand here first is how to log the, or what is listeners. So in Android, there is a concept called listeners. So listeners are basically functions which will be triggered on a certain user interaction. So let's say whenever somebody clicks something, whenever somebody, let's say, swipes something, or let's say somebody double clicks, long press, all these different functions, all these different triggers that are performed on a certain element. All these things will be triggered by using listeners, by using the specific listeners. Swipe listeners. There are different types of listeners according to different actions that we want to register. So in this case, we want to register the click, just the click, right? So we will write button save dot. Okay. As soon as you write button save dot, a lot of different functions pops up. The one which you're looking for is called set on click listener. So what this will do is it will add the listener, it will register the click listener on the button. So whenever we click the button, this function will be triggered. Okay, so we will write set on click listener new. As you can see, once we write new, give a space, it automatically says view dot on click listener. Just choose that, and it will automatically pre-populate the code that is needed. So what we did here is we added the set on click listener to the button. We have added the on click listener inside it that is required. So if you look for the documentation, it says we need to add an interface inside this. It says it requires an on click listener interface to be added inside this. So what we're doing here is we are adding that, which is overriding a function called on click. So to make it simple, we have registered the on click listener on this particular button save, and whenever we click on the button, whatever we write inside this on click function will be triggered. Okay, so whatever we mention inside this, whatever logic we write inside this will be triggered. So in our case, what we want here is we want to display whatever we have written in the input email part. Okay, so for displaying, as I said display, I meant logging. So by logging, what we do is we log the data in the Android Studio itself. It won't be visible on at the end. At the end user, it won't be visible on the app itself. It will be visible on the Android Studio itself. There is a certain window, as at the bottom, if you can see, it says log cat, and it will, here it is where all our logs will be triggered. So these are all the system logs that are getting triggered. So whenever as we open the application, all these system level logs are getting triggered. But what we want to do is we want to add our own log. We want to display our own log over there. Okay. So what we can do here is we will add log. So we'll say log, choose the first one. Now there are different types of logs. There is log.d, log.e, log.i, log.b. All these are for different purposes. So D stands for debug, E stands for error, I stands for info, V stands for verbose, W stands for warning. These are the general that are used. So if you can see, these are different colors. You can see it says D, I, W. There are E also. So E, as you can see, errors, it is in red, warnings are in yellow, information is in blue, debug is in red. So debug is used when we are trying to debug something. When we are trying to test out something, at that time we use debug. Info is used when you want to give a certain information while running the application. Okay, and warning is for giving the warning, and error is when there is an actual error. So for our case, we will use log.d. Now it takes two things. It takes the tag and it takes the message. So what is meant by tag here is on the left hand side, you can see all these things that are written assist structure, uh, gralog 4 or something. All these are system level tags. So tag is basically an identifier for your log. For example, you want to add logs to this particular file. You want to add logs for main activity. So when you run the application, a lot of logs will be printed out, right? But you just want to filter out the logs for main activity. So in order to filter it out, what we can do, we can use the tag to filter it out. So we will add simply a tag, let's say here as main activity, and whatever the thing we want to print. So what we want to print here is we want to print the email, right? We can directly do it to one line, but for the sake of understanding, let's create a variable. Let's create it as email. And what this will have is it will have the value that is entered in the input email. So we will write input email dot get text. So now what this will do is it will get the text that is written inside the input email edit text. But at this point, it is not a string. It is in the form of an object called editable. It's not a string. So what we will do is we will convert it to a string. Now I will simply pass it to the log to print it. Okay. So now what we have done so far here is we have added button save.set on click listener. We have added the interface. We have overridden the on click function, and we have added the logic inside the on click function. So now what should happen here is that we will enter some email and we click on the button. As soon as we click on the button, it will fetch whatever is there, or it will get whatever is there inside the input email edit text, convert it to a string, save it inside this particular variable, and log it with this particular tag. Okay. So let's run the application. So it's running. As you can see, it's building. To test it out, let's open logcat. Let's clear the logcat for now. Now let's enter the email. Uh, example at the rate example.com. And as soon as I click on save, it should give this tag over here and whatever I entered as the value. So if I click on here, you can see it gave the tag as main activity and it gave the value as whatever we have entered over here. Okay. So now this is a very simple example of log. It is now how we use it. So how we use logs are, let's say you have written a huge portion of a function where a lot of things are happening. Let's say you are doing an image compression, for example. You are taking an image, you are converting it to a certain size, you are compressing it, and you are saving it. So there are different states, there are different steps to it. And let's say at a certain step it breaks and you're not able to find it, like how, at which point it is breaking and why I'm not getting the value that I want. So in that scenarios, there are multiple ways actually to debug it. We can use debugger and all, but the simplest approach at that point is to add logs at different steps to check if the value that you are trying to pass from one function to another, is it passing accordingly or not. So you can add different logs to it, you can add certain tags to it, and you can just log the value, and then you will realize that okay, at this place this is where, up till this place where I was getting the value, but after this I'm not getting the value, and you can fix it accordingly. So that is why logs are important. Okay. Also make sure that all this debug logs and everything is removed when you're actually building the APK of your application. Okay. When you are building the build file of your application for deploying on the Play Store, we have to make sure that there are no critical logs. There shouldn't be any log which is displaying the email and password. Okay, because that is very that is a security risk. Okay, so we should make sure that that is not happening. Okay, so this is how we can see the logs. The next thing we will do is a step forward. What we will do here is we will add both email and password. We will check if there is an email and password. We are not checking anything else right now. We are not working with databases, authentication or anything. We will just check if we have entered the email and password or not. Okay. So we will write let's say a logic where we will check if the email and password is entered or not, and if it is entered, on clicking the button, we will show a toast. Toast is basically a UI component, UI element, which we all have seen in our Android application. It's basically a small text box that appears for a certain duration at the bottom screen. That is called toast in terms of Android. So let's say you have plugged your charger. It shows a very small pop-up message at the bottom which says charging started or 100% complete or something like that. There's a small pop-up that pops up giving you information and then it disappears. So that pop-up is called toast. So we will add that toast or we will give a certain message to that toast accordingly. So let's say if we have entered both the things, we will give a toast saying that you have successfully logged in. And let's say if we have not entered either of the two things, we will say please enter all the values or all the fields. Okay. So let's do that. First of all, we have got the email. Let's also get the password. So we will write input password get text dot to string. So we have saved the password in the variable. Uh, After the log, let's add the logic first of all. Okay. So we will create, let's say an empty string. Let's say we call it as post message. Let's keep it as empty for now. And what we will do here is we will check if email is not empty. So we'll write email dot is empty and we will add a not at the end, at the starting. And let's say if password is not empty, else. So in the first case, when it is not empty, we will have the message as successfully logged in. Otherwise, we will have a message which says uh, please enter all the fields. So now what will happen? We have okay. Let's use toast at this point. Okay, let's use a toast at this point. So we will toast. I mean, let's use a log at this point, not a toast, to check the toast message value. So we will again log it as main activity, and we can pass the toast message. So not now what we are checking here is we are checking if we have entered both the values or not. So if we have entered both the values, it will log this as the text in the logcat. Otherwise, it will log this. Okay, so let's rerun the application. Let's again clear this. Okay. Now let's just simply add uh, an email and click on it. You can see it says please enter all the fields. So we can see that our logic is correct, that uh, since we have entered only one of these values, it is giving this. And if I enter something like in the password, if I click on here, you can see it says successfully logged in. Now what we need to do is we need to display this message to the user. Okay. So we will create a toast. So we will write toast, use this, and it automatically pre-fills the function. So it says dot make text and it requires the context, the text, and the length of the toast. So context, if you remember, I talked about it in the very beginning. So there is activity level context, there is application level context. So in this case, we need to provide the activity level context because we want to display the toast for the scope of this activity. So for getting the context, we will just simply write the class name followed by this keyword. So in the second parameter, we require text, so we will simply pass the toast message. And last is the length. So, so there are basically two types of length for the toast. One is length short, the other is length long. So you can use either of those. So these are some predefined values. So you can generally it is use either the short or the long. So generally we don't add anything else. We don't add a custom value to it. So after this, we will add the show function, which will actually display the toast on the screen. So let's first of all see the length short part of it. So again, let's reload the application. So let's enter the email. And now if I click on save, it should display a text at the bottom saying please enter all the fields. So you can see it says please enter all the fields at the bottom, and this was the toast, and it disappeared after a very short time. If we want to increase the length of it, we can write length long, reload the application, and if I click on save, you can see it stays for a bit longer and then it disappears. Okay, so we can check for the second condition also. Successfully logged in. Okay, so this is how we can add the logs, the toasts. We can work with the listeners. We can like link the XML part with the Java part. And this is a very basic example of a form as of now. After this, we will work on some other UI components like menus, and we will see how that works. Okay, just a second.
Uh, Thank you, sir. Thank you for your amazing session. A lot of things we learned, a lot of things were refreshed back, sir, and a really wonderful session. So, guys, we will be going for a short break now, a 15 minutes short break, sir. And then, sir, we'll be returning back after 15 minutes break, sir.
Sure, sure.
Okay, sir. So, before we go, it's a small request if we can just have our camera on so that we can have a sort of a virtual group photo sort of session. Guys, if you all can just. Yes, I think it's done. So, thank you, sir. We'll get back after 15 minutes after take, sir. Uh, so we are back from the break. It was a 15 minutes break. Sir, uh, sir, I would request you to please continue the session.
Sure, sure. Let me share my screen and show the cam. Yep. So, okay, where we left off was the toast and the logs, these things. So we have covered pretty much a lot of things in the first half. So in the few things that are remaining right now, we will cover that. So the first thing that we will do is adding a menu to your activity. So in a lot of applications you might have seen there are some three dots at the very top right hand side. We click on those three and you get like certain options. So what we can do here is we can uh, add a certain menu option at the top right hand side. So let's do that. So it's the code for that is pretty less. The setup is more like you have to do a lot of clicks here and there, but the actual code is pretty small. So what we need to do first of all is we need to create a folder inside this res folder. So res is basically the resource folder. All the resources are added inside this particular folder. There are a lot of subfolders inside this particular folder. As you can see, drawable layout, map, values, XML. So these are all the different subfolders. So layout is having all the layouts. So our main activity is inside this. Map and drawable are having the images. Values are having the colors and the strings that we want to list down. And themes are having the themes. So what we need to do here is we need to add another resource directory. So what we do, we will do a right click on the resource res folder, go to new, choose Android resource directory, and it opens up a window. In the resource type, we will choose menu, okay, and click on OK. And inside this, we will what we will do here is we will do a right click on the menu. So after that, you will see you will get a menu folder over here. Once we clicked on the directory type as menu and clicked on OK, On the menu, click on do a right click, go to new, choose the menu resource file, and you can write it anything you want. So you can simply write, let's say, my menu. Click OK. So right now, what it will do is, let's just open the code part. So there is a mymenu.xml file that is added right now. So we need to declare all the different menus that we want to add it inside here. Okay. So we will do that. So we will have, let's say, two different menus. Let's say the first is home, the second is logout. Yeah, we will add two different options, menu options. The first one will be home. The second will be logout. Okay. So let's add the first one. We will write item and ID, and we will give the ID as, let's say, home, and we need to add the title. Let's say home. So you can add icons also. It's totally up to you. I'm not adding an icon right now. If you want, you can add icon and you can choose, let's say, whatever we are having. So we can use launcher background, but let's not add an icon. It won't look good right now because we are not having any icons as of now with us. The second one we will do is we add the same thing, and we will call this as logout uh, for the ID and for the title as logout also. Okay. So let's see first of all how we can add this particular XML file or link this particular menu to our activity. Right now, what we have done so far is we have created a menu file, named it as mymenu.xml, and added two different items inside the menu file. The first is home, the second is logout. Okay. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to go back to our main activity. And as you can see, we are working on this on create function, right? This was a function provided to us by app compact activity, and we were overriding this function to populate our UI and add the functionalities to it. But for this particular menu to be inflated, what we need to do is we need to override a different function. Okay, so we will write on create outside the on start. Okay, outside the on create function. So outside this, we will write on create options menu and choose this. And the first thing what we will do here is we will write menu inflator. Menu inflator equals to just a second. Yeah. So we will write get menu inflator. So what this will do here is that this will add the or this will give you the reference to the menu object that is provided to us by the Android SDK itself. So as you can see, it says overrides get menu inflator in class activity. So now this menu inflator, we will use this to add our or to inflate our menu inside this. So we will write menu inflator dot inflate. Are registered inside the R class. So we will write R dot menu dot, and you will see we will get our menu that we have defined over here, my menu. Choose this and the menu that is provided by us by the parameter, and then just simply return true. Okay. So now what this will do here is that this will inflate the menu, and we will see the three dots, and we will see the three different, we should see the two different options that we've added in the my menu file. Okay. So let's see that. So let's run the application. So as you can see that you are getting these two options over here. If you click on that, you will get home and logout, right? So we get two options, home and logout over here. Okay, so now what we will do here is we will click on those options and we will try to log, or we will try to give a toast. Okay, we will just simply add a toast to it. So we add a click to it and we will add a toast to it. Okay. So for doing that, what we need to do is we need to again override a different function. So for adding the menu, we overridden a function called on create options menu. We created the inflator for it. We added our own menu. We inflated our own menu, and that is how we are getting these two options. So right now, what we will do here is we will uh, click on these two options and we will add a toast accordingly. So when we click on home, we will just simply toast home, and when we click on logout, we will simply toast, let's say, logout successfully. Okay. So the different function for this is something called on options item selected. And what we will do here is we will do just simply use a switch case over here. So we will write switch and we will do item dot get item ID. And for the first case, that is r dot id dot a second. Home. What we will do is uh, we will give a toast, right? So just simply write toast context as this and simply write home and return true. Then for the another case, what we can do is instead of doing this, we will just simply write case r.id.logout and we will do toast this logout successfully, return true, and for the default value we will just simply return this. So what should happen ideally here is that what we have done here is that we are using a switch case, and for the case of home we are showing a toast as home. For the case of logout, we are showing the toast as logout successfully. So if we refresh this, click on home, it will give me a home toast. If we click on logout, it will give you a logout toast successfully. So actually, instead of writing toasts and all, we can simply use this we use this for doing a lot of different work. So I have just displayed the text right as logout successfully, but in real-time applications, a lot of database calls and a lot of things are done upon clicking all these menu items. So for that, we can use the same approach, the same building blocks. We can add the functions inside this use cases accordingly. Okay. So the next thing that we will do is we will see how group we can group all these menus. So we have just simply have one menu, right? We have simply just home and logout. There are no groups added to it. So we can see how we can do that also. So just a second. Or before that, what we can do is we can do the order part. Okay, so we can see how we can order these menu items. Okay. So if we go back to the mymenu.xml. So right now what is happening here is where we have added it, and accordingly it is displaying the menu items, right? It is displaying the items according to what we have entered in the similar fashion. Just a second. Yeah, sorry for that. So as I was saying, we'll look into two things. The first is let's do the grouping of the items, and we will also see how we can order this accordingly. So for now, for since we want to group items, we have to add a few more items to it. So right now we are having home and logout. Let's add a sub menu inside it, and it will have, let's say, one more option to it. Let's say uh, we will add a sub menu called settings, and we will uh, have a sub menu called, let's say, change text or something. Okay. So we will do that. So for doing that, let's add another item menu, and we will add an ID to it. Let's call it as settings, title it as settings. But this time we are not self-enclosing it. As you can see, for all the other tools, we were self-enclosing it. For this, we're not self-enclosing it. We have uh, proper end tag and opening tag, and inside this, we will add another menu option, and we will add the items. Let's say the ID for this would be uh, change color. Title would be change color. Similarly, we have another settings option which says, let's say, change size, and the title would be change size. So let's also add the toes for these. So we will write r.id dot change color. Toast would be this, changing color. Return true. Then we will have r.id dot change size. Toast would be this, and title on the text would be changing size. So let's see if this works. So what should happen here is there should be a sub menu option with title settings, and there should be two sub menu options, which would be change color and settings, change color and change size. So if I open this, you can see it says home logout, and inside settings, we have a totally different sub menu which opens up. It says change color and change size. Okay. So if I go into settings, if I click on change color, it says changing color. If I go back to settings, click on change size, it says changing size. So that is how you can add sub menus to your menus. The next thing what we can do is we can also add the order in which the options are displayed. Okay. So what we'll do here is for the first home, let's give the order in category as, let's say, 2 instead of 1, and for this as 1, and this as 3. What should happen ideally here is that logout should come first, then home, and then settings, instead of what we are having right now. So let's see if this works. So you can see logout came first, then home, and then settings. So this is how you can change the order of the menu options also. So accordingly, you can play around with it. You can add icons to it, and it will be displayed on the left hand side of the menu options. So it's still working fine. You can see, click on settings, click on change color. It's clicking on changing color. Just a second. Let me see what we have to do next. Yeah, so we have seen how to inflate the menu. So we have seen how we can create our own menu class. I mean, our own menu, how we can inflate it using the menu inflator. And we have seen how to handle the creating of sub menu, the order and everything. So this is done. So the next thing that we will do is we will add another element to our form, which will be using something called context menu. Okay, so we'll be adding a context menu to our form, and we will be seeing how that works and what it is. Okay. So let's first of all add an element. Okay. So let's do that first. Just simply add before the button. Let us simply add a text. Okay. Let us simply add a text view, wrap content, which says change background. Okay, it can be anything. I'm just adding it for now. Give the margin as 16 dp. Change the size to let's say 16 sp, and change the color to let's say black. So what we want here is that on clicking this option, the white background will be let's say changed to blue. Okay, let us do that. Okay, we'll click on this. We will get few options to choose from, and we will choose a particular option to let's say we click on this, we get a menu which says like three options. Let's say yellow, blue, or red, or something, three colors. If you choose any of those colors, the background will be changed accordingly. Okay, so let's do that. One more thing before we do that is we will also need to add an ID to the linear layout, because we want to change the background color itself, the entire layout's color. So for that, we will add an ID to it. So we'll add that here. Let's call it as parent layout. So and for this text, we will we'll call it as text change background. So let's go back to the main activity, and now we have two more types to be added here. The first is text view, which is text change background. Second is linear layout, which is parent layout. We need to link these two things also. So inside the on create, let's add this. So the first is text change equal to find view by id r.id dot text change background. Second is parent layout equals to find view by id r.id dot parent layout. Okay, let me check what I gave the name. Let's check if this is giving any error or there is some error related to ID. Yeah, so with some error related to ID, it's working fine. So yeah, so we have added two new elements. So the first is the text change background. The second is the parent layout. So we have added these two things. Okay. So the next thing that we need to add is we need to add the context menu. So context menu is basically a menu that appears when you click on something. So let's say if I click on this particular option, it would open up a small menu pop up over here itself, and we can choose the items inside it accordingly. Okay. So let's do that. So what we need to do for that is we need to first of all register the context menu to a particular UI element. So for in our case, we want to register it with this particular text. So we will write text change background, or sorry, we will write register for context menu, and we will pass text change background. So now we have registered our text change background with the context menu. Okay, so that when we override the function for creating the context menu, it has the context that the menu should be popped up for this particular UI element. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to add, or we need to override another function, which is on create context menu. Over here, we will say menu dot set header title as, let's say, choose a color, and we will add the menus accordingly inside it. So we will write menu dot add 0 uh, view dot get ID, and let's call it as let's say green. Oh, I have missed out one more, so it's 0 here also. Yeah. So you can see what it takes. It takes I1, I1, I2, and the character sequence. So these are the IDs basically that it is taking, and this is the text, and this is the view. So view basically would be, in our case, would be this. So it is taking the context of this, since we have registered our text change background by calling this function. So this view will refer to the text change background. So view.getID would give us back the ID for this, which is this. Similarly, we add two different colors. So for the next, we will, let's say, add it as red, and for the last, let us add it as blue. Okay. So now, if we just run this, let's see what happens. So you can see, if I do a long press, it says choose a color green, red, and blue. Okay. So this works. So the context menu, there is one more thing to it, that you have to do a long press for it to work. So if you do a long press, it opens up this context menu, which asks you to choose a color. Now what we want to do here is that we want to choose a certain color and change the background of the entire layout accordingly. Okay. So let's do that. So similar to what we did earlier, so the same concept here is followed here. So earlier we had an on create options menu that we overridden to add the menu. And we had another option to select or to perform an action when the item is selected in the menu. Similarly, over here, we have an on create context menu to create the context menu. And then we have another function to override, which is on context item selected. Okay. So we will use this to perform an action when we're clicking on a certain item. So we will say if item dot, let's say item dot get title equal to, let's say, green. What we want to do here is that we want to change the linear layout background color. So the parent layout, we can refer it, and we can say set background color to, let's say, r dot color dot or let's use the Android color itself, r dot Android dot color dot If we have green, yeah, we have green of some sort. So let's use this green. Okay. So it is telling us to use the proper way, so which is get resource, get color, Android. Let's simply write this. Doesn't matter. Let's take it out once if it works or not. So if you write else if item dot get title, next is red, parent layout, set background color, not class color. It's a red light, or else if your title is blue, color, and just one more thing. Let's check one thing. Uh, yeah, we can use this actually. It's better. Yeah. So instead of using the Android colors, let us just use this color class that is provided by graphics. So we can just write green, red, and blue. So what should happen here is that once we click on an item, we are adding the if else case over here. And if the title is green, it would set the parent layout's background color to green. If the title is red, it will set the background color to red. If it is blue, it will set the background color to blue. So let us check if it works. If I click on this and do a long press, click green, it changes to green. Do a long press, click on red, it changes to red. Do a long press, click on blue, it changes to blue. Let us add one more option to change it back. So let's call it as white and do item dot get title. Let's see. So green, red, blue, and white. So it works fine. Uh, just a second.
So we are done with the topics. Sir has really a great session. A lot of things from basics to having a sort of application. Sir has covered it. And now I would like to hand over the event to the technical team, Harsh, Raghav, and the technical team. I would now for the doubt session of the event.
Okay, so we have got some questions for Sir. The first question is, can you please explain the difference between SP and DP again?
Oh, okay. So for SP, as I said, it is basically when we are using SP and DP specifically for text and for all the other cases. For example, in case of text, we are using SP because it is we want to make the text scalable. So what I mean by that is we want to scale the text according to the pixels in your application, in your device, not an application, in your device. So what happens is, let's say you can give the text size as DP. So let me show to give you a better understanding. So let's say you have given this size as DP, it will automatically throw a warning on an error. It says that should use SP instead of DP for text sizes. So this is because, let's say if you give DP, it will hard code the size to it. It won't scale according to the pixels on the screen. But when it comes to text, we want that to happen. So let's say what would happen if you want to test it out. What I would suggest is that just give a text as, let's say, 5 dp, and go to your system's Android settings and change the font size to, let's say, large or mini. It won't change, it won't scale up. So what happens when you change the system settings, that it scales up the entire text, all the fonts in your device. But if you have given dp instead of sp, it won't reflect, it won't change. So in order to maintain that scaling to happen accordingly, it is required that you add SP instead of DP for text sizes. But when it comes to margin, we don't want to scale the margin. Okay, we want to make it fixed, that the margin is fixed. Because if we scale the margin, like it, things will shrink. Don't want to shrink it. For example, let's say if I've given an 8, or let's say in this case I have given a 16 dp as the margin. So if we scale that, it will come to here or somewhere, right? But the screen size remains the same. So we don't want to do that. So text might scale, but all the other dimensions shouldn't scale up automatically. Otherwise, it will break your UI. That is why text sizes are having unit size SP, and all the other dimensions are having SDP. I hope that clears it out.
Okay, thank you so much. The second question is, what is difference between on start versus on create method?
On start versus on create methods. So basically, what I would say is there are two different uh, states in the same Android lifecycle. Uh, so one is called after the another actually, but in on create is where we are actually seeing the screen on we are seeing the application on the screen. Okay, so activity is first created. So before it becomes visible to the user, it is called. So this is where we typically like initialize the activity, sets the layout, and initialize all the variables and objects that the activity will use. Whereas on start method is called when the activity becomes visible to the user. So on create is called before, and on start is called afterwards. So that is why everything, because we want everything to be pre-prepared, right? We want to be prepared before it actually displays on the screen. That is why we link all the layouts, we define all the variables, we perform all our logics even before the application is on the screen. So when the on start is called, the activity becomes visible to the user, and we this is where we typically add animations, or let's say we add or we register, let's say, broadcast and receivers and everything in that particular state. So to keep it short, like on create is called even before the application comes up to the screen, and on start is called as soon as the application is on the screen.
Okay. The third question asked is, as you mentioned some types of log, is there any
Uh-huh.
priority of each of them and difference?
Priority. So I would say, as I said, error is having the higher priority. So if there is any error, so that is having the higher priority. Then comes the warning, and then there are like debug info and let's say verbose. So there is, I wouldn't say there is priority as such, but it depends upon the use of the logs that you are adding to your application.
Okay. Is there any way to remember the hash codes of colors, like you were giving the hash color to this save button?
Yeah. So no, it's not possible to remember all the hash codes. So it's basically comes from a lot of practice and experience. So the basics are very simple. So if you know what is RGB, so RGB is like red, green, blue, and when it comes to hex code, the same RGB is converted to 6 digits. So the first two refers to R, a shade of red. Second to the shade of green. The last to the shade of blue. So if we give the maximum value to those two parts, for example, for the first two in this case, if we give it as FF, it turns to red because the first two character is representing the red shade. And if we give 0, 0, it turns back to black because all the shades are black. But if you're doing some like peculiar shades of color, then you have to search for it on the internet and add it over here.
Okay. The next question is there any alternative of toast?
Any alternate of toast? There is something called there is actually one more element. I have forgotten the name actually. It's been a long time, so let me check. Uh, there is one more thing called snack bars. Yeah, totally forgot about this. Yeah. There is something called snack bar, which was introduced. Uh, I would say a lot after the very time after the toast was introduced in a certain API level. So yeah, there is something called snack bar that can also be used. So it's basically like a pop-up that comes from very like it's an animated pop-up that comes up. You might have used it in websites also, where is a small bar that pops up from the bottom and displays a text and goes back. So that is an alternate to toast.
Okay. The last question we got is can you please explain how to add context menu item?
Add context menu item. This. So it's very simple that the thing that we need to take care of here is that we just need to pass the view ID, keep all the things as the default values, and just add the text to whatever we want to show the text as. And before that, even before that, what we need to do here is we need to register the element that we want to show the context menu on. So for example, if we want to show the context menu on this text in this example, I registered this text element by passing it in the function as register for context menu. So what would happen here is that if I do a long press, this particular like this particular function will be triggered, and the view over here will be referencing to the text. Since we have registered this text change background in at the top, it will refer to this particular text change background over here. And after that, what we're doing here is we're simply just adding the default values to it and just simply we keep on adding the different uh, text to that particular menu. That's pretty much it.
Okay, we got another question. Please
Mhm.
ask sir to explain about different layout and their functions.
Okay. So the one which we worked with was linear layout. So as I said, that linear layout means that everything that you like add inside that particular layout will be added linearly. So earlier when we didn't added the orientation as vertical, everything was going horizontally. That is why we weren't able to see the other elements. But since we added orientation as vertical, we are able to see all this in top to bottom fashion. But there are a lot of different layouts. So there is something called relative layout, which is so I think there are three major layouts. One is linear, one is relative, one is constraint. So linear is what we worked with. Relative is a modified version of linear layout where you can add the elements relative to the other element. For example, in that particular layout, what we can do is we can signify that this layout should come on top of this layout or bottom of this layout or left of this layout. We can add items diagonally to one another. Okay. And the latest one is the constraint layout, which is the a better version of relative layout where we can add constraints to a layout, that you can add like chains to a layout bounding the layout with one another. For example, let's say if the size of let's say if we bound this text to the start of this button, and if we bound this text to the start of this button. So what would happen here is that as when the size of the button changes, the size of the text also change. The width of the text will also change. So that is something that is there in the constraint layout. And linear layout, as I said, is very basic, just for displaying things from top to bottom. And relative is when we want to do a bit complex UI, where you want to add, let's say, items diagonally to it on and things like that. Then we use relative layout. And if you want to do much more complex stuff, we can use constraint layouts. Like you can do overlap of items, do dynamic changing of sizes with this changing of the other items on the screen. So These are the three main layouts and the differences between them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sohail sir, for such an informative session. I hope all the doubts are clear and your expertise and knowledge have been greatly appreciated. We look forward to the possibility of having you conduct similar engaging sessions in the future.
Thank you for inviting me for this session.
Now, I request you all to fill out the feedback form that will be provided. This will help us improve for future sessions. Also, this serves as your attendance for the sessions. Those who submit both the forms would be considered for receiving the certificates. And you also have to submit the project, those who have created that you have made for the event. We'll be providing a little something special to those who submit their projects. So make sure to fill out the feedback forms. Now there's a break from 1:30 to 3 p.m. Then we'll continue with the session 2. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also, we'll give the Android badge to the best attendees. Bhaiya, I've got a message that to share both forms link. So
Hello. You can share it in the chat section. Like, hello. Yeah, Dishita. One second, Dishita.